Jai Hind to all. Myself, Shikha Agarwal, Assistant Professor in IT Department of Ajay Kumar Garg Engineering College. Today, we are going to discuss about cloud computing topic, that is the types of virtualization. The subject code is KCS 713. Now, if I'm talking about the virtualization, before we talk about the what is the types of virtualization, we should be aware about what is virtualization. When I'm using the word virtualization, it means we are creating a virtual environment, right? Virtual of something, virtual version of something. It can be in the form of virtual server, it can be in a form of virtual storage space, server, storage, operating system, network resources, anything which I'm talking about the virtualization. So we can say when I'm talking about the virtualization, its definition is that we can say virtualization is that technique through which allows the sharing of a single physical instance of a resources by the multiple customers, by the multiple organizations. When the single instance is being shared or of a resource with the multiple customers, then we can say we are talking about the concept of virtualization. So we can see the definition also, that virtualization is the creation of a virtual rather than actual version of the something, that is a server, or it can be a storage device, it can be a desktop, it can be an operating system, it can be hardware, it can be software, anything. So we can say virtualization is a technique which allows the sharing of a single physical instance of a resources or an application among the multiple customers or organizations, and whenever they are demanding it, whenever the resources is being demanded, then we can say we are providing to the particular user. So we are assigning them by a logical names to those all physical storage devices and providing them a pointers to the physical resources whenever they are being demanded. Now the question comes, how we have to create a virtual environment, right? So suppose if I'm talking about the creation of hardware or any operating system, then initially what we have to do, we have to create a virtual machine over the existing hardware or over the existing operating system or over any software through which we can execute the applications. Then we can say it is called as a virtualization, in which we are creating a virtual realistic environment, sort of realistic environment through which we can work anywhere. Now if I'm talking about the virtualization, we are talking about the two machines. First is a host machine and the second is a guest machine. Whosoever is a host machine, the machine through which the virtual machine is going to be created, whether we are creating on a software, hardware, operating system or desktop or server, whosoever platform we are using, wherever we are creating, that is going to be a host machine on which machine we are creating, and the environment which is being creating as a virtual machine, then we can say it is called as a guest machine. Fine. Now we'll start with the what is a type of virtualization. If I'm talking about the virtualization, the basic are the 4 types, but still there are many types of virtualization exist apart from the hardware virtualization, operating system virtualization, server or storage. Apart from all these types of virtualization, data virtualization also exists, software virtualization also exists. So we can having a many types. So first of all, we are going to discuss about the hardware virtualization. As I'm using the word hardware, it means we are talking about the virtual machines, and simultaneously when we are talking about the virtual machines, it means we require the virtual machine managers who directly install the virtual network or to create the virtual environment onto the hardware system. Then we are using the word hardware virtualization. If I'm talking about creating a virtual machines, so it means we are using the word of hypervisor. What is the meaning of what is the responsibilities of hypervisor? They generally used to control and monitor all the processors, their memories, spaces, their hardware resources, how we have to install those systems, how it will run the different application on those operating system environment, whatever the environment we have created, how it is being executed, and so on. So this is what we are talking about, the hardware virtualization. So in a simple term, if I'm using the word hardware virtualization, it means we have to create or we have to directly install the virtual machine manager onto the hardware system, is known as an hardware virtualization. Now the question comes, why it is being required? What is its usage? So we can say, when I'm talking about the hardware virtualization, it is mainly done on the server platforms, so that we can easily control the virtual machines in spite of controlling the virtual servers. In spite of creating that virtual servers, we can create the virtual machines. Now the second is operating system virtualization. Operating system means, in spite of installing onto the hardware system, we can simply install on the different host operating systems. Directly we are not installing onto the hardware, we are installing onto the operating system. Suppose they are using the Linux, so according to that we will upload the virtual, or we have to create the environment according to the requirement, and so on. So that is called as an operating system. Now the difference between the hardware is that whenever we are creating it, its usage is that it is being done through the server platforms. But if I'm talking about the operating system basically, whenever we are creating a virtual environment, it is being used for testing the applications on the different application platforms, because we are having a lots of operating systems and we want to test the certain applications. So create a virtual environment, so we can talk about the operating system virtualization. The next is server. As I've already told you that in spite of thinking about the server, so we can install onto the hardware. But if we want to create the virtual environment directly onto the server systems, then it is called as a server virtualization. On the basis of using the server virtualization, it can be done because a single physical server can be divided into the multiple servers and it can easily balance the load. In the case of hardware, it is not possible. But in the case of server virtualization, if we create a virtual environment on a single physical server, then particular server where we have created the virtual environment, that is being divided among the multiple servers. And whenever they are demanding by the multiple customers, it is being provided to the users, and whatever the load they have, it can be easily balanced on the case of server virtualization. So if we compare the operating system, hardware and server virtualization, server will work for both hardware as well as for operating system, because through which we have created the virtual environment, and whenever the multiple customers can demand, we can easily provide them users. Now the last is storage virtualization. As we know, when we are talking about the data, we are having a lot of backups of the data, right? So whenever we are talking about the backups, is a natural disaster will occur, we need to do the recovery process also. And simultaneously, if I'm talking about the today's scenario, the lot of data is being generating a day. So due to which we have to create a storage virtualization. Storage virtualization is that particular process in which what we are doing it, we are grouping the physical storage from the multiple different storage devices, which seems to be like a single storage device. Like for example, I can say this is a storage device 1, this is a storage device 2, this is a storage device 3, according to the different users. Fine. And when I'm combining all these storage spaces into the single, fine. So it will be considered as a single storage space. Whatever the storage we have, it will consider as a single storage, due to which we can easily implement by using the software applications. And whenever I'm talking about its usage, the main purpose of using is that we can easily do the backup of the data. Whenever the natural disasters will occur, we can easily recover the data from the storage virtualization. So we have talked about the basics of the four types of virtualization: hardware virtualization, operating system virtualization, server virtualization and storage virtualization. After these, before we know the rest of the virtualizations, ki what all the types, different types of virtualizations occur, and what are its these whatever the storage devices we have talked about, whatever the virtualizations we have got, how, what are its advantages, how, where industries they are using, what are its disadvantages, we should know what is the, or how does the virtualization work in the cloud computing environment. As we all know that virtualization plays a very important role when we talk about the cloud computing technology, because when I'm talking about the cloud computing, basically users generally used to share the data And when there is a sharing is to be done, we have to talk about sharing the infrastructure, and how we can do the sharing of infrastructure with the help of virtualization. So that's why the main virtualization plays a very important role in the cloud computing technology, and that cloud computing is being using to share the data present in the cloud like an applications form, but with the help of the virtualization we can share the infrastructure also. Now if I'm talking about the virtualization work or virtualization technology, the main purpose is that we can provide the applications with the standard versions to the cloud users whosoever is using, and any time we can generate the versions of different applications. For example, if I'm talking about the Google Chrome, right, is presently we are using Google Chrome one version, then after that it is being enhanced by the certain features, then again we have to release the next version of that particular application, again we are adding certain features. So what happens, it is being generating the latest versions to their cloud users, and practically sometimes it is possible because it is more expensive. Now to overcome this problem, the basic problem is to be solved by the virtualization technique. This virtualization techniques helps the all the servers and the software applications in whatever they are doing it, they are maintaining their own cloud providers through which they are dealing with the third party peoples, right? And whenever I'm talking about the third party, it means whosoever is a cloud providers, they have to pay the money either in the form of monthly or annually on the basis of their requirements, and they can easily use that. So then we can say we can create the virtualization environment. Fine. So this is the way how the virtualization works in the cloud computing. Now after that we are going to talk about the different types of virtualization. As I've already told you, apart from the different virtualizations, we have talked about the other virtualization methods also. As I told you that we have discussed the 4 points, fine. Apart from that we also know the other methods also, and in all those 4 methods we should be know about the methods, what are its advantages, disadvantages. So first we are going to start with the data virtualization. What do you mean by the word data? If I'm talking about the word, it is being comprised with the 2 words, data and virtualization, right? So when I'm talking about data, data means it can be in any raw facts and figures. Data can be any text, it can be an image, it can be an audio, it can be a video. So when I'm talking about the different types of data, so can we use the word heterogeneous data, right? So in that case I'm using the word data. Second, if I want to create a virtualization environment, as I've already told you that in the case of virtualization we are creating a actual, in spite of creating an actual version, we are creating a instance of that data, right? So we can say we are talking about the data virtualization. It is the process of retrieving the data from different resources, as I've already told you an example of storage resources. So similarly we are collecting the data from the different resources or from the different resources. After that the data can be of different types also, and their physical location is to be different when we are going to store the data. So when I'm talking about collection of the data from the different resources, so data can also be of different type. If it is being of different type, so we can say it is being collecting an heterogeneous data, which allow the users across the organization to access the data according to their requirements. For example, if I require an image of particular data, so I can retrieve the data in a form of image also. If I want in a videos form, I can retrieve the data in a video form, and so on. Simultaneously, if I'm talking about the heterogeneous data is that type of a data which can be accessed by using any types of an application. Whether you are using a SaaS, whether you are using a mobile application, e-commerce services, web portals, from anywhere you can access any type of a data by using any type of an application. So if I'm talking about the data virtualization, we can say it is the process of retrieving the data from the different resources when the data can be of different types and it can be stored on a different physical locations. Now if I'm talking about the use of data virtualization means whenever we are collecting the data from the different fields, we can easily integrate the data. We can use for the business intelligence and in the case of cloud computing also. So whatever the data we have, we can integrate the data according to the needs. We can use the data as per our needs. So whatever the forms we can use, we can talk about the data virtualization. Now, if I'm talking about the advantages of data virtualization, you can see a lot of advantages we have. First of all, it allows the users to access the data without worrying about it where it resides to the memory, because it is not required any memory space. We have already created the data virtualization environment, and due to which user can easily access the data, use their data and leave the data. Now simultaneously, whatever the data we have, it offers the customer satisfaction, it generates the retention value and revenue growth. It provides the various security mechanisms also, that we can usually store their personal and professional information also, because by using the virtual environment, we can store our personal and professional information. Second thing, we can reduce the cost by removing the data replications, because we have already stored the data onto the data virtualization, so we need not to create a replicated copies again and again. Second thing, as per the customer's view, we can say it is a user friendly, it is very simple and a fast deployment resources. Second thing, when I'm talking about an organizations, it improves the data quality in the real time for increasing their business efficiency. They can easily increase their business providence. Second thing, in the case of the business organizations, it can perform the tasks such as data integration easily, business integration can be done, and सर्विस oriented architecture के लिए भी वो use कर सकते हैं. Fine. Then after that, it's true, if we are having an advantages, definitely we'll have an disadvantages also. Sometimes in the case of data virtualization, it creates an availability users. Like if we include the third party providers, if we include the third party, obviously they will ask for the cost. So simultaneously, and sometimes they are providing it, sometimes they are not dealing with it. So there is a lot of issues is to be coming. So we can say it creates an availability users whenever we are maintained by the third party providers. Second thing, whenever we are creating a virtual environment for the data virtualization, its implementation cost is very high. And simultaneously, as I've already told you that it is being included by the third party, so we cannot create the availability and scalability issues into that case. So it is being sometimes available, sometimes not. And simultaneously, as we know that it is being saving the time during the implementation of virtualization, but it consumes more time to generate the appropriate result, because we are collecting the data from the heterogeneous places also, heterogeneous physical storages also. So it will time to redefine that data, to modify that data as per the user's need. So come to out to the resultant. Then where all the data virtualization is being used. When I'm talking about the usage, there are the lot of various places where we can use the data virtualization. First, to analyze the performance. If I'm talking about the analyzed performance, as I've already told you, suppose an organization is using the data, it can easily compare their data with the previous years, right? So if I'm talking about its graph, by using the previous year data, they can easily find where their graph is lacking, whether it is falling down or whether it is moving up. So they can easily compare, they can easily check the performance of their organization's data. Second, search and rediscover interrelated data. As I've already told you that we can collect the data from the different places. So they are searching the data from different physical storage spaces, where after generating it, they can relate internally with each other. Whatever their requirement, they are mixing up the data, they are providing the mechanism that they can easily search the data. The next is agile business intelligence. Agile business intelligence matlab, if I'm talking about the common uses of data virtualization, it is being used in agile reporting, basically generating the real-time dashboards through which an individual and the managers, they can easily use to monitor the performance of daily reports, like in the terms of their sales, finance, logistics, legal departments, compliance reports, and so on. So they are generating the agile business intelligence. The last, we are talking about the data management. As I've already told you, In the case of data virtualization, we are creating a secure centralized layer through which we can discover, we can easily govern the unified data and generate its relationship as per the needs of the organization. Now there are the various tools where the data virtualization is being using. For example, if I'm talking about the Red Hat JBoss tool, they are generating the data virtualization tool also. We can talk about the TBOC data virtualization. TBOC basically they are using for the administrators platform. Fine. Oracle is also using, SAS is also using, and Danado. They all are the organizations who are being maintaining their network loads by creating the data virtualization. So they all are creating the data virtualization tools. There are the various industries those who all are using the data virtualization. First of all, we are going to talk about the government agencies. If I'm talking about the government agencies, basically they are using the data virtualization so that they can protect their environment, because they are having a lot of data, and if the data is being going from here and there, so it is of no use. So that's why they are talking about the maintaining. Second, we are going to talk about the communication and technology. As we know that we need to satisfy our customers, and whenever we are satisfying their customers, we have to fulfill their demands, and simultaneously we can easily increase their revenue. We can create the real time environments from doing the marketing, for managing their customers, for improving their efficiencies, to provide the services to the customers, and simultaneously to create an optimized customer care environment. So we are talking about the communication in technology. So next is we are talking about the finance department. Data virtualization is being used to improve the trade reconciliation, improving the data democracy, and simultaneously addressing the data complexity and managing the fixed risk incomes, so that we can easily manage the finance department also. Next, we are going to talk about the healthcare. In the case of healthcare field, we can improve the patient's care, so that by using the data virtualization, we can easily find the efficiencies of that particular software. How the problem is being generated, from where it is being generated, we can easily generate the reports from the large years also. We can relate the improvement of the patient's care also. Fine. That now we are going to talk about the in detail about the hardware virtualization. As I have already told you, in the case of hardware, we have to install the virtual machine manager onto the hardware system. If I'm talking about creating, so it means we are talking about a one-to-one relationship between the physical servers and operating system. Low capacity of CPU, memory, and networking requirements, all are these things being available. And after apart from that, we have to provide the physical space, amount of power, and the hardware requirement, whatever is being the cost. We all have to generate adding into them, and with the help of hypervisors, we can share all the physical resources of the hardware among the host and the guest machines, so that they can easily work onto that platform. In the cases of physical resources, we can become an abstract versions. We are not creating a real world environment, we are creating the abstract environments in the standard formats regardless of the hardware platform. Virtualization means abstraction to retrieve that data. Fine. So it means when I am talking about the hardware virtualization, we can are accomplished by abstracting the physical hardware layer with the help of or by the use of hypervisor or virtual machine monitors. They are managing the softwares, and they are installing the virtual machine softwares directly onto the hardware system. Then we are talking about the hardware virtualization. And if the hypervisor or the virtual machine manager, they are managing, so into that they have to control and monitor the processor, memory, and all other hardware resources. What is its uses? As I've already told you, that it is being done by the server platforms, so that we can easily control the virtual machines, which can be easier on the controlling the physical servers. Advantages is that more efficient resource utilization. As I've already told you, that when we are creating the physical resources among the virtual machines, then we can say we are creating an efficient resource utilization. Whatever the resources we are providing them, it should be in a form of heterogeneous, and it can be easily available by the users. whatever the overall cost we are talking about, once we have installed or when we have created the hardware virtualization, it depends on lower the cost overall. So because why? Because it is lower, because with the help of the single hardware platform, you can access a multiple operating systems. You can access so many number of servers, you can access any number of power consumption, and somewhere it is all being dropped down. The next is we can increase the uptime. What is the meaning of word increase the uptime? As we know that in the modern hypervisors, we will provide a high orchestrated operations where a n number of operations can be executed simultaneously. So in that case, that maximizes the abstraction with the help of the hardwares, and we can easily maximize the uptime because we are utilizing the time. Then after that, we are going to talk about the increased IT flexibility. If I'm talking about the flexibility, it means we can easily generate the quick development of the management. So hardware virtualization also helps for the quick development of our server resources in managed and in a consistent way, so that we can easily use the resources needed in a good time. Next, we are going to talk about the software virtualization. Software, in spite of installing the virtualization or in spite of creating a virtualization environment, we can install onto the software. Managing an applications or different typical tasks of IT departments, or installing a mechanism for a particular application, from application to a particular application, we can easily work about the software virtualization. So software virtualization is just like a virtualization, but able to abstract the software installations, procedures, and creating a virtual software installations. If I'm talking about its example, so we can say VMware software virtual boxes we can create. These are the examples of software virtualization. Now if I'm talking about the advantages of software virtualization, in comparison to that, we are having a 3 advantages. First is client deployments becomes easier. Means if the clients are working from the different workstations, right? So you can easily copying a file to a workstation, linking a file to the network, so that they can easily install the virtual software. Second is easy to manage, because we are having a simpler task to update the managers. You need to update the one place, and it is being updated on a virtual machine environment, so that it can be easily by all the clients. The next is software migration. Migration means that we can move the software from one platform to another platform, or from one location to another location. So it will not take much time for the deployment, and simultaneously it will help or create the virtual software environment. Migration becomes easier. So we can easily migrate the softwares from one platform to the another platform. The next, we are going to talk about the server virtualization. As I have already told you that if I am talking about the server virtualization, we have to install the method of virtualization onto the servers only. So if we are creating the server virtualization, it is the process of dividing the physical server into the different virtual servers, through which we can say all those servers are called as a virtual private servers, and those private servers, they are running independently without concerning it that they all are being the division of single virtual server. If I'm talking about a virtual server, like if I'm giving an example, if I'm talking about a server 1, okay, right? So it is being divided into the 3 instances, fine. After creating the instances into the 3, whosoever is system is being considered with the server 1, and whosoever is being linked with the server 2 and server 3 and so on. So they are working independently. Whatever their working pattern is, they all are working independently. So we are not into the concept of that it is being running onto the different networks, and simultaneously each of them are called as a private servers, virtual private servers, fine. Now if I'm talking about the different types of server virtualization, as I've already told you that if we are creating the virtual server environment, it is being divided into the different types of server virtualization. The first is hypervisor in the server virtualization. If I'm using the word hypervisor, So obviously I'm talking about either an hardware or an operating system, right? Because hypervisor plays a very important role in the concept of operating system or hardware. So there are the two types of hypervisor, hypervisor 1, or you can say type 1, type 2. If I'm using the word type 1, it is also known as a bare metal, or you can say native type of an hypervisor, or type 2, it is being called as a hosted or a embedded hypervisor. Basically, the main purpose of using the hypervisor is to perform the various tasks such as allocating the physical hardware resources, like you can provide them CPU, RAM, ROM, etc., and small independent virtual machines on which we are having a different guest, fine, and onto the host machine. The second type is a full virtualization. As I'm using the word full, it means we are using an hypervisor directly communicating with the CPUs or the physical server. It provides an isolation or the security mechanism environment to the virtual machines. But if I'm using the word full virtualization, it's the biggest disadvantage of using this hypervisor is that it has its own processing needs. If the one virtualization is to be slowed down, so all the server applications, server performances is to be degraded. So everything is to be shut down, fine. Or if the impact is being generated onto that server, then the full server virtualization will not work. The example is VMware ESX server. The next is para server virtualization. Para virtualization is quite similar to full virtualization, but a little bit different, because it is having advantages that it can be easier to use, we can easily enhance the performance, and simultaneously the difference between both of them is that in the case of para virtualization hypervisor, we does not require too much power processing to manage the operating systems. In comparison to that full, it requires a complete processing needs. Whatever the time is being required, it is being executing or communicating between the CPU and physical server. The next is operating system virtualization. As I'm talking about operating system, it means I'm talking about the different operating systems virtualizations. We can easily do the virtualization on different operating systems, like on Linux, on OpenVX, on Windows, Linux, Ubuntu, and so on. So in that case, what we have to create a virtual environment, we are creating a one single system level virtualization, and it is being divided into a one operating system through which we have created a user space environment, virtual environment onto the different operating systems. But using the single virtual operating system environment is that it will reduce the use of the physical space. It will saves the money, fine. And after that, I'm talking about the hardware assistance. As I'm talking about the hardware assistance virtualization, basically it is being present onto the hardware levels. So it is being presented by AMD and Intel. These are the two organizations, those who are providing the hardware assistance. And hardware assistance, the advantage of using the hardware assistance is that it requires a very less number of hypervisor overheads. The next is kernel level. If I'm talking about the kernel level, this is the most important type of a server virtualization, in which we are creating uses of Linux kernels as in hypervisors. The advantage of using the kernel virtualization is that it does not require any special administration software, due to which we are having a less number of overheads. We can easily, user can mod Linux, and kernel based virtual machines are the best example, because we have to create the small kernels of small level, so that we can easily execute the data. Now if I'm talking about the advantages is, first of all, we are talking about independent restart. If I'm talking about independent restart means each and every server, as we have divided into the n number of servers, every server is being working independently. It will not affect the work of the other virtual servers. So into that case, we will not impact any generation, right? So everywhere we are not considering that we are having a single server virtualization, so that it will create an impact on the others. Second thing, as we have divided the single server into the multiple virtual private servers, so somewhere the cost of hardware components is to be reduced. The next is disaster recovery. if I'm talking about the disaster recovery, with the help of the server virtualization, we can easily recover from the disaster. Fine. So next is faster deployment. Faster deployment, we can easily deploy in a simple way of all the resources whenever it is being required. And the next is security. As we are working in an independent environment, so we can talk about the single servers. Yes, if I am having an advantages, then we talk about the disadvantages also. If the server goes and offline, everything is to be shut down. Nothing is to be worked. There is a huge performance. We cannot measure the performance of the virtualized environment. If everybody is working as a private networks, then we require a huge amount of RAM consumption. It's for creating a setup and environment is to be difficult. Usage, that we can improve the availability of the servers, we can allow the efficiency of the organization so that they can use the n number of resources, we can reduce the redundancy and so on. The next is storage. As I've already told you that we can create a physical environment between the physical storage and the local storage devices, and we can easily work on to it. Now if I'm talking about the storage virtualization, having the different forms, that we can store the data in the form of file servers, how we are writing the files, we can create the WAN accelerators, we can create the multiple copies of the same data over the WAN environment, so that once it is being shut down, we can easily rectify the data. We can talk about the SAN and the NAS environments, we can talk about the store tiering. These all are the terms which we are talking about the storage environment. Its advantages is that we can store the data in a very convenient locations. We can use the data from different locations. For example, if the host is being failure, the data is not compromised necessarily. It will create the replicated copies. We can easily recover the data from the natural disasters. Thank you.